Here we are, Mem Gimel Amud Beis 43b. I want to dedicate the learning to the Refuah Shalema, the speedy recovery of the Shlucha the Rabbi was talking about. Who's fighting for her life. Her name is Henya Bas Bracha Devaira Leah. She had a miraculous and speedy recovery. Mother of 12 children or something like that. It's not important to see the whole story, but essentially her child fell into the water and did not make it, but she jumped after her child to try to save the child, and she's now fighting for her life. Yeah, that's the story. That's sorry?
Here or in Israel?
In a shlucha, so Chabad, the Rebbe Shliach, Chabad emissary in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. Yeah. Anyway, she had a speedy and miraculous recovery and returned to her family in good health. So I'll dedicate the learning to that.
If you're trying to put together
Yeah.
line numbers from the text that you're on now, like it looks like you're on Vav. Is that a Vav there?
I'm highlighting the word letter Vav, yeah.
You're highlighting the second part of Vav. So, but it's not the same line number.
I don't have any line numbers at all in this text.
There's none.
None.
I'm just trying to match up left and the right.
Oh no, these aren't line numbers.
They're not line numbers.
They're paragraph numbers. Those are Steinsaltz's original paragraph numbers. They're not line numbers. So they're not going to line up. Okay, so the Gemara is, where are we holding? The Gemara is trying to establish what is a circumstance in which our Mishnah is of the view that there is a circumstance under which grafting and layering a vineyard warrants exemption from combat units. That's our Mishnah's premise, as opposed to the Brisa we quoted, which said, no, grafting is not a good enough reason to be exempt from battle. And to avoid dispute, the Gemara said, well, when we tell you that you don't go back from battle as a result of grafting, as if the grafting was a forbidden grafting. Right? But if it's a kosher grafting, that's what our Mishnah means, and you go back. And the Gemara challenged, well, under what circumstance would kosher grafting warrant going back from war? And the question about being exempt from battle for grafting will come down to whether this grafted fruit falls into the laws of Arla, right? Because the verse said, one who has a field hasn't redeemed it yet. This redemption is applicable only when you're talking about plants or vegetation or fruits, vegetables, whatever it is, that fall under the laws of Arla. Arla being the first 3 years you don't eat it, and the fourth year, redeem. So if the verse says you have a field, but you haven't redeemed it yet, then we're talking about the kind of field for which redemption is a matter, which means it has to be a kind that falls under. It has to be the kind under which the laws of Arla apply. So what kind of grafting would incur the laws of Arla? Right? That was the Gemara's challenge. If the original field is old and that it's already gone through the Arla process, then when you graft in a new vine, the new vine takes on the law of the old one. And therefore, Arla doesn't apply to begin with, and therefore don't come back from the combat unit. If you're taking a new vine and putting it into a new vine, well, you're already exempt from battle because of the new vine, not because of your grafting, because you have a new vine right there. Yeah? To which the Gemara concludes, the original vine does not fall under the laws of Arla because you built it as a border around your property, or you built it for the wood. You didn't plant it for the sake of the crop that will yield. And therefore, the laws of Arla don't apply to that original vine. Now that you're grafting a new one in, and this grafted one is for the yield of fruits, That's the one that gives you Arla, and that's the one that gives you the exemption from battle. That's what the Gemara left off. And the Gemara challenges and says, now this Gemara actually gives you this, what the Gemara is about to do, gives you the inclination that the Gemara is a conglomerate of conversation that sometimes happens a generation later. Because sometimes what the Gemara will do is, you suggest that for example, right here, yeah, the Gemara says, our Mishnah, which says you're exempt for a grafted field, is referring to a original field that was meant for a border of your property, and the new grafted one is for fruit. And that new grafted one for fruit gives you the exemption from battle because the new laws of Arla apply. Right? Now the Gemara could have said, well, here's another option for what the Mishnah means. But the Gemara doesn't do that. The Gemara says, you could have given a different option. And you didn't give that option, which means you disagree with the law on the premise. Who's the one speaking to whom saying that? So it must be scholars of a later generation are looking at a scholars of an earlier generation and saying, well, you guys applied the Mishnah under this circumstance, which means this circumstance you disagree with it, because otherwise it would have applied it to that circumstance. Right? So it gives you an indication that the conversation that's happening there isn't necessarily people sitting across from each other. It could be sometime later they're analyzing an earlier conversation, because the Gemara again spans a couple hundred years. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's like the Gemara doesn't tell you who's speaking when. The narrator just talks without telling you who's speaking. And part of the exercise of learning how to learn Gemara is to know when someone's stopping to talk, when's the narrator speaking, when are we quoting someone, what generation is that person we're quoting from, and therefore what status does he have. And given the context of what the Gemara is about to do now, it would seem to me that the line we're about to read is coming from a later generation, analyzing an earlier generation's commentary, which we learned yesterday. That's what it would seem to me. So let's see. The Gemara says like this, V'lukma, why don't you establish the Mishnah to explain how grafting is a reason for exemption? The kerem shel shnei shutfim. When you have a vineyard belonging to partners, and as Rashi explains it, one guy owns the original vine, and the new guy owns the vines that are being grafted in. Right? And therefore, me, the partner, okay, so Robert owns the vineyard, and I grafted into his.
I own
you own the original
for just vines, or
sorry?
Is it the vineyard that's just vines, or it had Orla?
It's a new vine. Never had it.
No, yours is new.
Both of ours are new.
Oh.
Both of ours are new. You planted a new one, and I'm now grafting into yours. So you are exempt from combat unit because you just planted a new vine. I grafted into you. Do I get exempt from battle or not? So perhaps says the Mishnah, why don't you just say it? That's what the Mishnah is talking about. The Mishnah is teaching that if I graft a new field into your new field, I get exempt as well because of my grafting. I can't get exempt from the new field because the new field belongs to you. I'm only exempt because of the grafting into your new field.
Why? But the grafted one gets to assume the status of...
Well, maybe it does, but that wouldn't exempt me because I don't own it. I don't own the original field. Maybe the new grafted one takes on the status of the old one, right?
Yeah.
Or takes, right? But that wouldn't exempt me from battlefield. Because do I have a new field or not that requires exemption?
Oh, you need a new field.
What gives me exemption? Not your field, because I don't own your field.
Your field.
It's my grafted into your field that gives me the exemption. And that's what the Mishnah means when it says a person who grafts gets exemption.
Depends on it for a year or so anyways.
Right, but I mean,
might as well go to war.
Okay, well, the verse says that if I have a new vineyard and haven't redeemed it yet, I get to stay home from battlefield, lest I die and lose out on my field. Okay, so I haven't used it yet.
But you said they're partners. Partners in what? Half
Yeah, the Gemara is going to address that.
Half of
okay.
The whole or half of half?
You're touching a very good point, which the Gemara is going to address in a moment. And to be honest, I'm kind of pointing in that direction because I have a question on the way Rashi frames the Gemara. But precisely what you're saying. But let's put a pin in that for a second because you're right. You're right. But now, before we get to what we think, let's first understand the Gemara.
Two separate vineyards also.
Okay, so it's two separate vineyards. There's no grafting. Let's go backtrack a second. The Mishnah said, for grafting, you're exempt from battle. What is the circumstance of that grafting?
Probably better.
No, but what's the circumstance? That under what circumstance would grafting give me an exemption?
Field.
So this is what we were discussing yesterday. If the field that I have already is new, then I'm exempt from the new field, never mind the grafting, right? So now the Gemara is suggesting, well, what if the field belongs to one person and the grafting belongs to another? The field belongs to Robert and the grafting belongs to Levi. So Robert is exempt, yes, because he has a new field. Now, the fact that Robert has a new field is not good enough reason for me to be exempt. I'm exempt because I grafted into his field. And that's what the Mishnah means, that someone who grafts gets an exemption. And yet, the Gemara didn't do that. Following? So let's see that Gemara. The Lukma, why don't we establish the Mishnah to mean, when the Mishnah says that a person can get an exemption from combat unit by virtue of his grafting a field, the Kerem Shel Shnei Shvutfin, when there is a field of two partners. Tahai, this guy, the original guy, Robert, who owns the original field, Hadar returns from battle, Adidei, because of his field. Tahai, and the other guy, Levi, who grafted, Hadar is exempt from battle, Adidei, for his contribution, namely the grafted fruit, the grafted new field. Sorry?
Is it a ploy?
Maybe it is. Let's say it is. That's the difference. I mean,
So it's a reference.
yeah, we're talking about the theoretical law.
But he didn't graft the field, he grafted one.
He grafted vines into the new, it could be a whole one, right? Like I grafted 100 of them. I don't know.
He did 100, then it's a different story.
Why?
Because it's a new field. It's going to be a new field.
Oh, so that's the point. So here's a new field that's being created through grafting, and that warrants an exemption.
Okay.
So why didn't the Gemara use that as an example for the Mishnah? Instead of talking about one guy grafting and the original vineyard was made as a border. The new grafted one is made for fruits. And that's my exemption. Keep it simpler. Two partners. One guy has a field. He's exempt because of his new field. Another partner, Levi, new grafts into that field, and he's making a whole new field out of grafting, and he's exempt for that. Just say that. And yet the Gemara didn't. Therefore, says the Gemara, Amar Papa, therefore Papa says, this indicates to us from the fact that the Gemara did not do that. So the Gemara is analyzing.
They didn't take the simple case. Why? That's the question.
Exactly. That's why I'm assuming it's a later generation discussing the earlier generation. The later generation is asking, why didn't the earlier generation take the simpler case? Must be a reason that Kerem Shel Shnei Shutfin, that when a vineyard is owned by two partners, you do not get exempt from the battlefield. You don't get exempt from the battlefield. Because if partnership would warrant exemption, the Mishnah would have stayed so. Or the Gemara would have learned that into the Mishnah. And for the fact that the Gemara, I guess some previous generation, did not learn that into the Mishnah means they're of the view that partners are not a good enough reason for exemption. To which the Gemara asks, why is this different than another kind of partnership, which is 5 brothers. And one of the 5 brothers is married, no children. Now he dies. He dies in the battlefield. Right? Now what happens? All 4 of these brothers are partners in the woman. Because by law, any of them could either do yibum, either marry the sister-in-law, the deceased brother's wife, if she's childless, or either of them can do chalitza, the separation process with the shoe. They're jointly engaged to this woman. And what's the law? The kulon chayzrin. All of them return from the battlefield. So here we have a kind of partnership in marriage, or in betrothal, in which they all return, and yet you're telling me that partnership in a new field doesn't return from the battlefield? They're also jointly owning something. Says the Gemara, no. Hasam, in the case of brothers, it's not a true partnership, and this gets to something you were saying. Because kol chad v'chad, each and every individual brother, karina be'ishtoi, can refer to her as his betrothed. None of them say, this is my shared betrothed. Each brother's claim to that woman is not linked to the claim of the other brother. They each individually say, I have a claim. And thus they return from the battlefield because they have a claim to a woman they're betrothed to. Even though it's all or nothing, exactly right. It's not shared. It's not a shared claim. It's individual claims belonging to 4 people. It's 4 individual claims in one woman.
Triggers it.
We'll get the whole thing. or lose the whole thing. Either way, that's right. There's not dividing this marriage. They just each have a claim to the marriage, and therefore their claim is individualized, and thus they each return from the battlefield. Following? If you're not with me, please pause. Stop me. Sorry. Until one does something. That's right. But at the moment, that's right. At the moment, each claim is individual. Yeah, we're clear. But hacha, if we're not, please stop me. Hacha, but over here, in the case of partnerships in the vineyard, kol chad v'chad, each and every person, like karinebe, each of the two partners, cannot call it karma his field. Neither of them could say it's my field, because every single branch and every square inch of the branch is 50% owned by each. In other words, there's how do you understand partnership? Two guys own a building. This isn't legal Canadian law, civil law too. Two guys own the building. So what do? This half belongs to me, this half belongs to you. Or these 5 floors belong to me and these 5 floors belong to you. That would be a partnership. That would just be owning separate floors. Partnership means we each own 50% of each inch. Right? So at the partnership in a field, there is no individualized claim. That's the Gemara's response. So when it comes to a partnership in a field, this is no exemption from battle. There's no exemption from battle because there's no individualized claim. Each one owns shared ownership in each and every vine. Whereas when it comes to brothers who each have a claim to a woman because their brother died and they each have a claim potentially to marry her, their claim isn't shared. It's not as if my claim to marrying her is linked to my brother's claim to marrying her.
They all have equal shares.
It's not equal shares, but they have an individual claim.
Okay, so there's 5 individual claims.
And the question is who's going to take it first. But no claim is linked to the other person's claim.
His brother marries the woman.
Then all the other ones lose their claim.
They have twice as much as the others.
They have the whole thing. It's a zero-sum game when it comes to the marriage. They each have a full claim. Whoever grabs it first gets it. And the others lose their claim. It's a zero-sum game. When it comes to a partnership, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not as if my claim weakens your claim or my claim is a counter to your claim. It's a shared claim. When it comes to the brothers, each claim cancels the other claim out. So right now they have all equal claim. One person takes action, the other ones lose their claim. Sorry?
We're 5 people here.
Yes.
We each have a claim.
To what?
An equal claim.
To what?
To the vineyard.
Okay, so then that's not an equal claim to the vineyard. It's a shared claim. I share the ownership with you. My ownership is not a contradiction to your ownership. They're shared.
So it's one claim.
Exactly. It's a share. It's one claim, shared. Okay. Now when it comes to brothers, 4 brothers, 1 dies. So 3 of them potentially can marry this woman. How do they ever share that claim? They can't share that claim. No, it's not. It's not shared claim. Because if one person takes her, the others 2 lose it. So it's not a shared claim. How are they sharing the claim? How could they share this woman? We are sharing the field, right? Which means each of us can walk in there, eat the fruit, sell it. We each can do all the stuff together. Can 2 brothers marry the same woman? Can they both marry her? So they don't share a claim. They have an individual claim that cancel each other out. My claim to the woman is a contradiction to my brother's claim to the woman. Because if he marries her, I can't. And if I marry her, he can't. Following? So it's not a shared claim. They have equal claim in one woman, but not shared claim. Whereas when it comes to the partnership of a field, they have a shared claim. That's the Gemara's response. And here's my question, and to your point, especially the way Rashi phrases it, which is how I translated it for you. I explained it to the way Rashi explains it.
Why wouldn't he be exempt, right?
No, well, I know why he's not exempt because he doesn't have a full claim. In other words, like this. Let's look at it this way. Why did the Torah say you go back from battle? Because lest God forbid you die and you don't get to enjoy your fruit. Someone else will enjoy it. In the case of a partnership, both of them have to die for that to happen. And that likelihood is much lower. Maybe I can reason that way. Or I could say it's exeris akasa. This is just the way the verse wants it. Now, my question is, Rashi is telling us, the way I just explained it to you, that each and every vine is owned 50% by both partners. Is that the case if I graft something into your field, I own your field now? Is that what Rashi's telling me? And that you own my grafted stuff? That's what Rashi keeps to be saying. Because this whole case of why partners are not exempt from battle because each and every person owns 50% of every single thing because of a shared claim, right? Each and every individual vine is owned 50% by both, right? That has to apply to our original case. And the way Rashi framed our original case is, you have a new field, that's why you're exempt from battle, and I have a grafted field into your field, and that would have exempted me. But the Mishnah says no, which means we're both not exempt. You planted a new field, I grafted into your field, you're not exempt, I'm not exempt, because we're partners. Which means I own 50% of your vines, and you own 50% of my vines that have been grafted into you. Is there no possibility for a person to graft into another person's field, and I own the grafted stuff and you own the original field? Why can't that be a split? That's more like you own the first 10 floors and I own the second 10 floors. Isn't it? That's my question on this. Come on, I don't have an answer. I'm just telling you my question.
Be stipulated because
it seems like
you're taking something from someone else to create something new for you.
Okay, so I pray for the privilege. Let's say I paid you for the privilege.
Well, then there's consideration there. Then you paid for it.
Well, how else would I have done it? I would have stolen it from you. Then I'm not exempt from battle because I stole, right? Then I lose my exemption because I stole, if that's how I did it. Obviously, there's an agreement here, right? But Rashi seems to be saying that even under such a circumstance, each of us own 50% of every vine. Why can't it be that I don't own 50% of the whole vine? I just paid for the right of grafting into you. And that's it.
That sounds like
that sounds like you own 10%. Yes, but but that's what it seemed to be. In the original case that was presented, right. It seems like we stipulated that I'm
that agreement.
Obviously
owned 100% by him.
It seems like it, but the Gemara, from the way Rashi's framing it, seems to be that the Gemara is rejecting that kind of.
He's not exempt.
Because he's not exempt, because they're partners, because they each own 50% of everything, right? In my mind, again, obviously I'm wrong because Rashi writes otherwise, and I'm just trying to understand them. Just presenting my question, I'm sure it's discussed in the commentaries. What I'm saying is like this: imagine a 20-story building, and you own the first 10 floors, I own the second 10 floors. In that, even in halacha, even if we didn't stipulate it, there would be an agreement that you're allowed to use the elevator to get to your 10 floors. Even if I didn't stipulate it in the contract, it would be self-understood that if you own the top 10 floors and I own the bottom 10 floors, you can use the elevator to get to the 10 floors. And we have to share the maintenance or the cost of that elevator or whatever, we have to figure out how
you share in that common.
Just in that, but not the rest of the floors. Right? And there's all kinds of halachas in Torah about this. That if the floor collapsed, who pays for it? How much to pay for it? Replace it at the regular level it was, replace it with new materials. There's all kinds of laws about this, both in halacha and in civil law. So why can't it simply be applied to me grafting a field into your field? You own your field, I own my grafting, I paid for the rights of the grafting. Even moreover, in halacha, there's something called hamoicher dekel l'peresav. I can sell a palm tree to you, but you don't own the palm tree. You only own the fruit that's going to produce.
This is different though, because
why?
Maybe because the grafted plants are within the field of the other.
Couldn't I pay for that right? I pay for that right.
It's not a
but all the grapes that come. Yeah, let's put it this. If I graft into you, how do we split the grapes? 50-50 of all the grapes? Presumably we split it. I take the grapes from the grafted one, and you take the grapes from the original vine. Isn't that right? Well, if we own 50% of a 10-story building, then whatever the income is, we split 50-50. Yeah. If I own the top 10 floors, you own the bottom 10 floors, then you take the income from the bottom and I take the income from the top. Because we own different parts of the, right. And if I have less tenants, I lose out, right? So likewise with a grafted grape vine, is it not the case that I take the yield from the graft, you take the yield from the original, right? And if that's
unless they're so intertwined
that's the only thing. That's the only thing I'm thinking. That once grafting is achieved, they grow so much intertwined that it's impossible to decide which vine belongs to who. That's the only way I can explain it. That's the only way to explain it. We must conclude. Again, I'm not a grafter. I'm not a what's the word? No, a person. No, there's a word for it. Someone who does vines. No?
Propagation.
Nah, Rashi was owned vineyard. This we did for them. What's it called? Anyway, I don't understand these things, but perhaps that the only thing I have to say is like you're saying, that the grafting is so intertwined and they grow on top of each other and into each other, it's impossible to decide which vine belongs to who, unless we have to have agreed, or the halacha forces us to agree that we each own 50% of everything. That's what I'll have to conclude. That would seem to me the only way out of this conundrum.
Yeah, because if you and I are farmers,
yep.
and I have white sheep and you have black sheep,
Yeah.
and we decide that I'm gonna keep the white sheep, you're gonna keep the black sheep. What happens if they,
Yaakov love an arrangement.
that's right,
Yep.
what happens
If they
one ends up
crossbreed?
gray?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would assume you own 50-50 there.
Who owns it?
Yeah. Well, the halacha does discuss this. If my bull mated with your cow and who owns what and what was the arrangement, this is all discussed in halacha. Like, what's the arrangement of that partnership? It's all discussed. Did you pay for the right of that animal? I could even pay you for the right of your cow being a surrogate mother to my calf. I can do that. So I don't have any cows. I have a bull. So I pay you for the right of using your cow to carry my bull's offspring, whatever. All these things are halachically possible. But it seems in our Gemara that it's impossible halachically to create a scenario where I own the graft and you own the original. That's what it seems like from our Gemara. And I'm asking why. And it would seem the simplest reason is because they're too intertwined to make that division. So we have to go through the laws of partnership in Hashutfin and the Gemara in Bab Basra and see if the Gemara discusses ways of splitting vines in which you own part and I own the other part versus, as it's stated here, we each own 50% of everything. Right? That requires investigation.
These big conglomerates, so Del Monte makes fruits. They own parts of farms.
Sure.
Or they have rights
Sure.
parts of farms.
Right. So all this is available in halacha. You can buy right. Yeah. That's what I was talking about. There's something called deka leperesa, which means I don't sell you the actual palm, but I sell you the rights to the fruit that the palm bears. Right. So that's also possible in halacha, which is to sell the rights versus selling the actual object, and that has its own
lease agreement. It's a lease.
Lease agreement, but it's like in perpetuity. It's in perpetuity until I buy it back, whatever. There's all kinds of halachas about this, especially when it comes to marriage. Like if she brings property into the marriage, who does own to, who owns the fruits, who owns all kinds of discussions. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah.
Husband has rights to the fruits of her property.
But not the actual property, depending on what kind of property she's bringing in.
Right. Land, it could be
That's one example of Dekala Peraisav. Yeah. Okay, have a wonderful day, Eden.
That's it.
It's already 10 past 9 and we started a little late today. So Mr. Shem, one day we'll do a little Fabrengen about Steinsaltz and God willing, one day maybe we'll do a series on the history of halacha. I think that's an important thing to understand. Okay, wonderful day, Eden.
Good day.